Greetings and salutations, Internet. How is everyone today? Hold on, we're waiting. We're waiting. Oh, okay. I guess the internet can't really talk back to us. Nick, how are you doing? Since you
Uh,
can talk back.
yeah, I'm hanging in there. Tonight's show is going to be interesting and hopefully therapeutic for us all.
Okay, therapeutic is a word. That's an adjective that can be used. Um, yeah, let's go ahead and kick it off. I'm thinking about how to open today's episode, just because there's so much to talk about. But first, let's actually, Nick, before we get into it, because that's just going to keep going forever. Um, you were recently on another show, weren't you?
Yeah, I actually had a chance to jump over to another channel that I really appreciated the invite. I got to be on. Jason McLean is the producer of the channel, and he invited me to his show, Not Another Bible Study. And it's funny. I was brought over for those listening tonight, and my friends and family out there, of course, know. I'm very, humbly, when I say proud, I mean it humbly. But I'm very grateful that I am a follower of the Lord and my family. I've been baptized and communed as a Catholic Christian, and so I had a wonderful chance to participate on Jason's show. And it was funny because we didn't get into necessarily politics too much at all, but it's interesting. While I was sitting there thinking about how my worldview focuses my political perspective, and how my faith perspective helps to support that. And you and I were chatting before this show tonight about the struggles of being in a position where your ideology is so discordant from your belief structure and your ideals in actual practice. And again, I don't want this channel to turn into bash the lefties. That's not what I'm trying to say. But when you see things like what we're going to talk about tonight, where people are like, well, justice was served, and all we had to do was dox people, threaten people, apply charges that don't seem to have met the burden of proof. And we'll get into all of that in a minute. But you just see things shifting. You see all norms being broken and changed. And it's funny what people are willing to do to break the law in effort to pursue justice. So it was nice to be on Jason's show where I could find myself kind of thinking, wow, this, contrary to what the point I'm just making, I was like, wow, this is a great chance to discuss why I think and feel what I think and feel. And it's comforting. And for some of our fans out there tonight, I hope they've had that experience as well. It's comforting to know and see that your thoughts and ideologies align with your actions and your ideals and how they come together. That was a good place to be. And then additionally, just to have a friend like that, to be able to engage and have people to talk with about such a wonderfully inspiring and important topic. It was great. So everybody here tonight, thank you all for joining us. Welcome aboard. This is, of course, Not Playing Politics. If you can, please check out a friend of our show, a dear friend of mine personally, Jason McLean, and his channel, Not Another Bible Study. It's absolutely fantastic. I think you'll get a good chance to see kind of where the Bible is coming from a lot of different perspectives. But it's a great open forum conversation. So I was grateful to get to be there. Absolutely.
I'm glad. Yeah, unfortunately, I had something else. I really couldn't be there at the same time you were, but I'm glad you got a chance to do that.
Sure.
But
that time space continuum gets tricky, doesn't
it? It can. Yes, it can. That having been said, I think you said something that I think is a good lead in on this, which is, if you believe in justice, that those who commit crimes, those who do evil, should be punished, and that truth is the thing you should pursue above all things, then what happened with Chauvin is not a good thing. I think there's room to agree and disagree on what he was guilty of, if he was guilty of anything, how and why. There was legitimate room to have a discussion. I'll put uh, my cards on the table on that one. Um, I I honestly did not think it met the murder. I mean, particularly murder three. I think was absolutely just not. It wasn't even that it met the burden of proof. It wasn't even It wasn't even something to that should have fit the crime. If there was, if you want to say that there was a crime that was committed, it certainly didn't fit. But I do think that there is a very solid argument for manslaughter, that he had no intent to kill him, but that his negligence, the way he went about certain things, uh, would in their totality come to a point of negligence that led to his death, or at least was a contributing factor. Now the problem is, I think on all of this is the there is no good solid evidence that he actually that anything Chauvin did actually caused his death. But that doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't manslaughter. Since it's hard to parse, you can argue that being in the prone position for so long, given the amount of drugs in the system, was the problem. And this is why I do think it was negligent. It was clear that he was on drugs. By the time Chauvin was there, it was clear that he was on drugs. They should have left him in the car. I know they were trying to calm him down. That's what they were trying to do. The problem is, we've seen time and time again that if you have someone who's on a lot of drugs, it happened here in Dallas several years, actually 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now. But there was a gentleman, white, which is why you never heard about him. This exact same thing happened. They left him in the prone position. He was crashing. He was in an excited delirium, and he died while they were waiting for the ambulance to arrive. And they did say that they've done studies. These prone positions are not the best way to keep someone long term if you fear they may be crashing. So I think there was enough there for him to have said, "Hey, I need to approach this differently." That is the responsibility that he had. I don't think there's even an argument for the other charges, but he got all three. And that's what bothers me, is that it is clear, and everyone is basically saying the quiet part out loud. The reason all three were he was convicted of all three was because of interference by outside threats of violence. Everyone's saying that out loud. Even the meat puppet himself is saying it's because of all this that it happened. Now, they're not saying we threatened to kill them and that's why they did this. They're not saying it quite that, quite that dramatically. But they absolutely are saying that it's because of it's because of the violence, it's because of the riots, it's because of all these things. That's why Chauvin got all three charges, and that should bother every one of us if you care about truth. If you care about true justice, which is people looking at the evidence and coming to a reasonable understanding based on what the facts are, not what the mob says.
So this, it's funny, over the last day or so of trying to think about it and engage and disengage and all the things, right? To pray, to understand and to try to learn. I had a chance to speak with a dearest friend of mine shortly before the show tonight and bounce ideas back. And this is a person who's known me literally since I was 6 years old. And while I was writing to them, there was a part of me that felt like, this is obviously someone I can talk to very openly and say anything to, and they know the same, no matter what. I mean, whatever designation is closer than family, that's what we are. And I found myself after a while thinking, like, even though I know I could say anything to this person, and I have and I did, there's that part where you feel like because you care about them, you don't want to come across as dark or unkind or cruel or anything. And I just found myself sharing things with them almost unexpectedly, even to me, like, wow, where's my mind going in this? Because I think there's just been there's been such conflation about this case and in what it means. There's been almost no, follow me down this path, guys. There's been no verifiable information at any point, at any time whatsoever, that this was racially motivated at all. At all. I mean, I've never heard it once, other than those saying that conflation, saying George Floyd was black, this is a police officer, therefore it's racially motivated. I'm talking about, there's no history that I'm aware of, there's no challenge that I'm aware of, there's no expectation or response or anything. There's nothing from the evidence of the case, the history of the officer, or anything that I'm aware of that breeds the thought of this being a racially charged incident, except for the fact that we now occupy a time where racial identity supersedes everything. And I mean everything. It supersedes your identity on faith. It supersedes your identity in the law. It supersedes your identity in business, in education, in society. It's everything. All there is race.
It's almost as if they've, and again, I'm using the almost as if in quotation marks because this is absolutely the case. The argument that has been made by the left is through racial identity is this idea that your racial identity is what you are. There is no difference. And I'm you know what, I wasn't necessarily going to go this way, but I think we need to.
Well,
this mentality, this racial identity and identitarianism is just another version of the basic fundamental underlying premise for the Nazi agenda. I don't want to jump. Everyone's like, well, you don't jump to the Nazis, but no, you do when you have to when you are being and actually advocating the same thing they did. Now, we could easily point to the rise in anti-Semitism in the black community, but we're not even going to go there. What I'm saying is the basic premise of Nazi ideology is that your race is determinative of what you are, that is the prime denominator, not where you were born, not how you're educated, not your thoughts, not your beliefs, not your education. It is your race. That is it. That's the only thing that matters. That is racial identitarianism. That is the same philosophy. Now, is it being packaged differently? Absolutely. But make no mind. This is exactly what it is. Like you said, there's no evidence that Derek Chauvin did anything that he did because George Floyd was black. Moreover, the prosecution themselves never made that claim. They never even hinted at the claim that this had anything that racism had anything to do with it. But the reason racism is purported to be the reason this occurred in the mainstream by identitarians is because George Floyd was black and Chauvin was white. Therefore, it could only be due to racial identity. There's no other option. There's no other options presented. This is that same mentality that your race is what you are above all others, and this is an inherently destructive ideology.
So the feelings that I was discussing before, the thoughts, how these things are culminating and coming together, and how I'm kind of unpacking the way that they're being conflated. What I'm seeing, what I'm thinking, and what I'm feeling. I mean, a lot of different thoughts coming together there. Is on one side factual and on one side emotional. So I'm going to pursue the factual side first. As I was saying, I don't believe there's any type of presence of there being any type of racial motivation behind this whatsoever. I believe that one, if not more, of the officers present were a minority. I believe that the store manager that was present that made the call on George Floyd for passing false bills was a minority. I mean, this was not. This is America. This is multiple races coming together, both on the police, the law enforcement side, the alleged perpetrators, and the store owner, the victim who was claiming it. So that's a given. I mean, that's just part of the fabric of the people that are in this country. That's just a part of who they are. So I struggled with that, but it was embraced and taken up as this hanging of all things social justice and racial justice on this situation. You saw the scales being affected and being tipped in all types of ways. This trial never should have been held in Minneapolis. First off, Minneapolis is the epicenter of racial instability right now. You had the attorney general, you had the state representatives, city officials, and representatives from outside the area in Maxine Waters, and even that of the president of the United States making comments. I mean, it's just beyond, just beyond that. Do I think that it should be appealed? Yes. Do I think that it will be? I don't know. You have to find a court that'll take it up and move forward. So do you do it a year down the road and let everything settle down? Does our country just need a Band-Aid? I mean, think about it. Does our country really need that right now? As disgusting as it may be to put justice on hold for either side of any situation whenever it comes to the court system at any time, you never would want to do that. Oh, well, you know what? This poor innocent, Chinese guy didn't do anything wrong, but let's just give it time and then we'll get to him later. I don't care what your race is. It doesn't matter. You never want to delay justice. What's the saying? Rather a thousand guilty men go free than one innocent man convicted. It feels like we're kind of switching back to that other perspective of, lock everyone up and then just figure it out later. And from the factual side, George Floyd had evidently 3 times the level of fentanyl in his system. A recent fact I was not as aware of is that he evidently had 75% of arterial blockage in his body. So there were a lot of factors going on. The second thing to the officer, according to the video footage and the information presented, he was not in any type of illegal hold. According to trainings and stuff, some people said, oh no, this could have been excessive, and then someone comes along and breaks this down. Now, if you want to have a talk about what they're doing with regard to as I understand it at least, if you want to have a conversation about police tactics and all these things, that's fine. That's an open conversation to have. Absolutely. Absolutely. But we're not in a place now that we're allowed to make that choice. It's between two extremes. We're being forced into an environment of false dichotomies, of false choices. You either want to defund the police or you're a racist. And so it's like there's no channel to go to. So what I want to get back to on the factual side is I think George Floyd was having a lot of situations and events taking place in those moments. Now, if you look at the video footage, that's approximately 16 minutes long, where he's doing all of the negotiating back and forth. I heard somebody explained it in an interesting way, and they said, if a police officer or anybody wants to drop you to the ground, even safely, or they said dangerously, you can actually do it with one person, probably a little more easily to do it dangerously. You just drop them. If you try to do it safely, it actually takes a lot more, because it looks like they're restraining him and doing all these things, but they're actually doing a lot more. So I don't think when it comes to the charges, and I'm not pushing back on injustice. I'm pushing back on, I think it was inappropriate, meaning inaccurate, the improper charge, because it didn't apply to the crime. I don't believe that there was intent in any way whatsoever. Secondly, this was a seasoned officer who was on video camera of multiple officers with a lot of people in the area. But many times, the conversation that we've entered now is, if you see a minority and there's a police officer, there's only one narrative allowed. Quick side note, you're seeing it already. If you looked at the news earlier today, LeBron James was very quick, as the legal scholar that he's known for being, as putting out a text that said, "You're next," to the officer who was part of this situation recently, where you've seen where he saved multiple people's lives by stopping a situation with the use of force. Of course, the stories coming out of the news didn't say that. It just said, oh, well, there was a weapon in the area. This young woman had a knife and was swinging it around people, that they were calling 911 and saying, oh my gosh, what's happened? Help us, help us, help us. So what does
Well,
LeBron James do? Well, he comes out and he just deletes the tweet. Well, there's no accountability to LeBron James, and
right.
there's no accountability to the media. They'll just move on.
Well, and here's the
But
worst. The worst part of it was it isn't just that she was swinging around. She had another girl against the car, pinned, and she had the knife raised. It was she was positioning it for a strike. If the police officer had not shot her straight up, we don't know that other girl survives, because the way she had it, that looked like there was like she was not. This was not a love stab that she was going in for. But that again is irrelevant. The only thing that's relevant is white cop, black shooting victim. Even though even though she was the criminal, even though the life of a black person was saved is irrelevant. That
sure,
doesn't matter because it doesn't. Because to your point, it doesn't fit the narrative.
right.
There was recently a protest for someone who was shot by police. They turned out to be white, and everyone went home.
That's correct. You're talking about the Black Lives Matter rioters that showed up to petition.
Mm-hmm.
They found out that the victim was white, evidently, and then that they disbanded, from according to the story that I saw as well. But the concern that comes here, as you're seeing, is that where it seeps into this is, and my concern to this more is, and this is going to bring me over from the factual side to the feeling side, and that is in how the narrative is being handled. On Twitter, you can find an article going around now where people have posted signage around the spot in Minneapolis where George Floyd died. And at the bottom of the posting where they're talking to everybody, it actually says, for white people that are present, here are some additional information. Now, again, I will never use this channel to turn into something about us versus them or anything, but I will use it as an opportunity to explain a perspective and ask the bigger questions like, let me ask you this. Other than white people, could you put any group on that list and identify them and not be looked at as an overt racist? Could you put, for women, read this section? How about for gay people, read this section? How about for Muslims, read this section? For deaf people, read this section. You get my point. It doesn't matter. There's no one else you could ever put there. For Koreans, read this. For African Americans, you could not put a single other group there. So it's this narrative part. Now here's the other part that I'm going to get to, and I'm going to end on this. And I appreciate you letting me develop this plan as it passes, sweeping like a pendulum from the academic and the factual based side to the emotional. Because for me, it has been. I'm realizing it has been a little bit of both. And that is this. I'm drawing from those that have said this before me, so I'm not seeking this as my own thought, but I'm putting my own interpretation to it. As I've heard it explained by others, be they minority, be they female, be they whomever, the fear that seems to be present in what I see moving forward is we're not elevating the conversation of race. We're debasing it. We're minimizing it. We're reducing it. Because what we're saying is, if justice gets in the way and it's racially related, then justice is the problem. So what you're seeing now are schools, jobs, communities that are pushing a thought process that is detrimental to the racial health of the country. I'm going to give you an example. When we were kids, black, white, or green, purple, or blue, what was the one thing we were all told and I'm asking you this, Alex, directly. What was the one theme we were always told as children? No matter who you are or where you come from, as long as you work hard at this, you have a chance to be successful in our country. What was that? What was that key?
Make certain you bribe the right officials to get in.
Certainly coming from my family, that was it. No, It was education.
Yeah.
Even
I'm sorry. Let me push back on this just a little bit. I think Herman freaking Munster, I think, said exactly what your whole point is what we were taught, which is it doesn't matter how tall or short, fat or thin, white or black. None of that matters. What matters is the content of your character and the size of your heart. Yeah, that's an actual quote from the Munsters.
And they're known for their cheese.
Exactly.
That's
the whole point. That's what we were raised with. Is that it's not supposed to be about how you look; it's about who you are.
Right. So what we've done by saying, and you've seen stories that say things like schools are going to break down the paradigms of racial injustice in mathematics. That's the beauty of math. It doesn't know race. It's the openness to give everybody a chance to succeed based off of their work ethic. Now, are there certain people that might not have had the certain same experiences, exposures, and opportunities? Sure, absolutely. Absolutely. And those are things you can work on socially as teammates through education, through family, that are good. But when the family's decaying, and I'm going to get there in a minute, that's the part. But what I'm getting at is education. My family on my father's side, back to my great grandmother, they were immigrants, and I mean off the boat. As I've said many times before, my family came here on the boat from Italy, and my father's only second generation American. And what I'm getting at is that education was integral in my family's ability not only to assimilate but to become successful, because that was the channel. You just had to be willing to work. Quick side story just to share with you guys on a personal note. My grandmother, who we called Nonna, in Italian meaning little grandma, Nonna was the youngest of five, and she came here with, again, immigrant parents. She was born in this country, but she went, her parents stressed to her how important school was. She took their message so literally that the legend in our story goes, in our family, the legend goes that when Nonna came home from junior high, elementary school, junior high in that time, she was crying, and her older sister walked in and said, you know, her sister didn't call her Nonna, but for purposes of the story, I'll use Nonna. She said, what's the matter? Or what's going on? And she held up her history book, and she was upset because she thought she had to read the entire book by the next day. And she made one B one time in school, and she was so heartbroken that she was worried she'd be disowned or kicked out of the family. Now, why does that story matter, and why am I going to brag about my beautiful Nonna, who's in heaven now? Is because at 19, she became a professor at the University of Pittsburgh. Now, I want you to put that into perspective. It was 1931. Why do I share that? Because a young immigrant girl who got off the boat, well, who was born in this country, but whose family got off the boat just 19 years before, 20, 25 years before, was a professor at the University of Pittsburgh at 19 years old. This country is amazing. The opportunities are amazing. But education was integral in that. So what have we done now? We look to communities, and rather than say it's about hard work and doing the best that you can, we say things like, school is racist, you don't need it, we're going to break the system down and get rid of them. Just today I read a story that talked about how they're going to get rid of advanced graduations and stuff. Now you can only, like, there's not going to be advanced classes, or how they're going to work certain points with regard to that. Now, again, schools can handle how they're going to do what they're going to do. I did not dive into the story, but what I will say is this: when you start homogenizing things, and having worked in education, when you start having that forced regression towards the middle, you're going to lose a lot of students. COVID showed a lot of parents that they could homeschool, and I'm wondering how much of that we're going to start to see. And what I wanted to end on is what I heard this person say, and I felt that their comments were very strong. And they said, just because I'm Black, why do people think that I have some natural inherent connection to George Floyd as a person? I didn't know him, and I obviously did not share the values and ideals. I'm not here to speak ill will of George Floyd. I didn't know the man. And I think that if you're going to be truthful, for me to be truthful with all of you, I want to pray, quite honestly, for the soul of George just as much as I do the soul of Derek. Because in talking to my friend earlier tonight before the show, in our conversation, which really meant a lot, we were discussing how shameful and how heartbroken it is when we've reduced these people who were once young men to the embodiment of everything that implies division in our country now. I know that George had a rough past. You need not read but 2 seconds of a Google search and you can see, I mean, there was the presence of sin, as there is in all of us, in his life. And there are those who, I'm seeing you guys right on the boards tonight, that you think that, the charge of manslaughter was justified. I can, that's the only charge when I looked at this that I could at least, if I asked myself, what would you do on that court? I couldn't see the first 2 charges. I couldn't. I don't think it was intentional, and I don't think that there was third-party deliberate intention to expose others from the 3rd degree count. The manslaughter one, There could be arguments made, but again, I have to think about in my heart of hearts, what would I go to? And I would go to intentionality. I just don't think there was any intentionality. I think there was responsibility. I think there was accountability. And if that got into the line of manslaughter, I understand that perspective. I genuinely do. But I think that when we put this house of cards together, where what we've gotten out of all of this is billions of dollars of damage, lost lives, a broken sense of community between people, and now we want to strip people of their abilities to get an education, all we're doing is creating an accelerant to this disunity.
I want to go back and answer a couple of questions that respond really to a couple of comments that had popped up, and then I want to return to an earlier thought because it does tie into the questions that we're sort of getting in the chat. Firstly, there was speculation that perhaps Chauvin and Floyd knew each other. No one who's aware of the situation has actually made that claim. It was sort of thought and sort of circulated around the internet that perhaps they knew each other because of working at the same bar, but no one has asserted that they actually did know each other. But let's assume, even for a second, if they did, you could still make the argument that what he did, because during the trial they mentioned that that Chauvin actually had other far more aggressive tactics that could have been used, like a taser, that could have potentially put Mr. Floyd into cardiac arrest much faster. Again, like the use of a taser. You could, if they did know each other, you could even make the argument that he was actually using lesser force and being as accommodating as he was. I know it sounds like, well, he was on him for 9 minutes. They originally had him in the van or the SUV, right? They originally had him there. He was in. He was freaking out. They let him out, and as Nick pointed out, it took all of them to try and get him onto the ground where he was asking to be put. Right? It isn't. That's why I don't think they actually did know each other, is because I'm certain that the defense would have said, "Why did you do this? Why did you do this?" He could have just said, "I knew the guy. I knew he had a troubled past. It was clear that he was on drugs, and so I was trying to calm him down. That's why we wanted to put him down on the ground, because he asked to be put there, but he was still writhing around. He was still, panicking. So I want to keep him from hurting himself." I think that would have come out had they actually known each other. So I don't think that they did. And this goes back to, was it manslaughter by negligence? I think there's an argument for that. Should he be found not guilty, but maybe of an actual crime, but he should have been punished for negligence? Again, I think there's an argument to be put here. The point, though, isn't, because we're not in that position to argue and know all of the facts, but it is very clear that what happened with the trial had nothing to do with the facts. It had nothing to do with justice. It had everything to do with making a sacrificial lamb for people to feel better. He was sacrificed as some sort of woke scapegoat. And going back to what I had mentioned earlier about identitarianism, I don't think they're trying to necessarily make individuals racist by attacking white people. I think that identitarianism is itself racism. It is racist. It is a racist ideology. Now, I think the one thing that Nick and I have been talking about off show that I'm really starting to notice is, whether it's Cloward and Piven, whether it's Saul Alinsky, all of this, the racial identitarianism, which we call the woke crowd, all of it. The question that we keep coming to is, why are they doing this? What is the goal they seek to achieve? And I think the thing that has bothered me the most is, the only answer I come to is, the vast majority are just going along, right? The vast majority of the people who are participating in these riots, who are participating in this racial identitarianism, They're just going along to get along, right? They don't have another sense of right and wrong. They don't see it. They don't see it for the racism that it is. They don't see it for how divisive it is. They're trying to find meaning in their own life. But for the people at the top, the actual thought leaders in this, I don't think that they see any of these things as having a higher purpose beyond destroying what is. I think that's the worst part of all of this is there is no utopia at the end of it. I don't think the people who are really the thought leaders behind these movements are really going for a utopia. They just want to destroy what is to replace it with what they've already acknowledged. It's Marxism. They're not trying to fix anything. They're trying to break it so that Marxism can come in. Now you can say, well, but isn't Marxism a utopian ideal? Maybe you could argue that. But none of these people who are really thought leaders are doing and saying these things to achieve a higher goal beyond destroying the system that is, destroying the West as it is, and remaking it as a Marxist system. That's the goal. So no, the real problem here is none of these thought leaders they're not actually concerned about George Floyd. They didn't care about him. They needed him. It was just a convenient tool to really reinforce and promote this racial identitarian mentality. And of course, if someone is listening who doesn't necessarily agree with that take, okay, fine. Then tell me, specifically the idea that racial identitarianism is itself racism. It's not reverse. It is straight racism. And I would argue it's the same foundation upon which many other great crimes, including the Ku Klux Klan, the Nazis, all of them have shared this racial identitarian philosophy. If you don't think that it's racism at its core, ask yourself this. There's a gentleman who's actually based out of Dallas. He's a black gentleman. His name's Eric July. He's a great guy. I've had a chance to talk with him online a couple times. He's in the comics as well as I am. And he has a libertarian metal band. It's amazing. It's called Backwards. And he has several channels. He talks politics. He talks other things as well. But he did one on race years ago, and he's quoted himself a couple times in this one because I think he realized how good it was. But I think it's brilliant. He pointed out that when he was a kid, when he was running with gangs, when he was causing trouble in the black community, not one person ever said that he was being inauthentically black. Not one. When he was causing trouble, getting into fights, stealing stuff, damaging property in the black neighborhood, no one ever said he was being inauthentically black. But the second he became libertarian, the second he said, you know what, maybe my political ideas don't align with the Democrat Party, he became every word that I won't mention on this show that are racially motivated epithets. Most of them come from white liberals. A bunch do come from black people as well. But it's every racial epithet that you know. So the question is this: why is it that black people aren't allowed to have differing opinions? Why is it there's only one opinion that's allowed? It has to be with the Democratic Party. If racial identitarianism, which is what the Democrat Party is and the left is really supporting right now, it's become the cause celeb. If it is itself not pure racism, then why is it white people can have differing opinions? Why is it blacks have to have the same opinion? And if you stray from that, you become not black. Why is it that only white people can have differing opinions? It is because racial identitarianism is itself racism. It is the same racism that birthed the Ku Klux Klan. It's the same racism that has plagued humanity since day 2. Day 1, we only had one person. Day 2, as soon as we had more than one person on this planet, we hated each other. It's that same spirit. It's that same thing. And we have to fight it. And we have to acknowledge it for what it is. It is a destructive and evil philosophy. It's a mentality that will destroy all of this. And that's what's and we have to realize that's what it's intended to do. It's not intended to build, it is intended to destroy.
So I think the concern that you're stating in the way that I hear it, and something that I'm pondering, is when you're a white kid, you're, and I'll speak for myself. I was never ever in my life ever told to cherish my whiteness, ever, because that wasn't the issue. It was about understanding my family. Many of my friends that are out there will tell you, genealogy is very important to me. I will talk with many of them about my look at what we're doing tonight. I busted out a Nuna story on you guys. Like, anybody out there who knows me, and now our wonderful fans tuning in tonight, so glad you're here to learn about Nuna, knows that I am very much drawn to the heritage of my family and the background of my family and all the directions that it goes and all the wonderful people that are in it, be they Indian or Moroccan or Italian or Irish, Scottish, whatever we may be. But as a child, compounding that, just looking back on it, because in the time I didn't think to know about it, because again, you and I, we were raised in very much of a post-racial world. We acknowledged people's race, but it wasn't something that we sat around and had to talk about 24 hours a day. So what am I getting at? It was never a subject that was ever brought up to me about embracing, acknowledging, recognizing my whiteness, my whiteness, my whiteness. So I don't feel that my race is something that can be taken from me. My culture, my identity, my religious views. I don't believe there's a single part of me other than, God forbid, safety, which is not something that I, own. But, in this world, other than safety or health, which neither one I really have a control over, other than not eating too many donuts, what I'm getting at is that those things can't be taken from me. What I've seen a lot through the African American community, both in what's being presented, not through my friends that are Black, which is funny. When I talk to them about things, that's not something that I really get into. Maybe one or two have talked to me about how they'll view members in pop culture and their identity and what it means to how that person may be represented in the media. But when you look at the media, whiteness is something that needs to be rejected and castigated. Well, it was never something I was told to cherish in the first place. So that doesn't resonate with me. I don't know how to, you need to reject your whiteness. Cool, done. Let's go get a taco. It doesn't mean anything I don't know what it means. But when you see the way the media encapsulates Blackness, where we were talking about before, it's not about your education, it's not about your family history, it's not about your intentions, it's not about the conduct of your character, it's not about your dreams or where you're going. It is all about the melanin levels in your skin cells. The dermatological proof that you are created for a purpose is based on the levels of melanin. Okay. Well, do you see where one side is looked at as viewing race as something that isn't either significant or talked about or something that they really, okay, even really acknowledged. I've said many times before, it's the most boring part of my personality is to be a middle-aged, Caucasian heterosexual male. These are all like boring elements of who I am. But when you make it the central hub and ram that narrative down people's throats for decades over and over, will everybody buy into it? No. But some will. And they'll think that identity is there. So what happens? Snoop Dogg comes out. This is going to be a ridiculous sentence to say out loud, but Snoop Dogg comes out, and when Kanye started to support Trump, he put up a Photoshopped picture of Kanye looking white to say, you see what I can take from you? I can take your Blackness away. Because it's a commodity, not to an actual person who their identity is having a knowledge of their family and their history and everything. No. Through the lens of the warped media, it is treated like a commodity. That's sickening. I had somebody explain it to me, that dear friend that I told you about. We were having a conversation earlier, and I don't think they would mind if I said this, but if I get sued by copyright infringement, I'll let you know how the verdict comes down. And we were talking about the struggles of what it is that we were dealing with this whole situation, and how it's designed to inflict and drive a wedge between us? And they responded with, it's the snap of a stretched rubber band. And we bounced back and forth, and the next line was, yeah, that ends up slingshotting back and blinding all of us. So what I'm getting at is this perspective that I don't have any intention to surrender my race, because I don't necessarily feel it as though it's something I really purely identify through. Furthermore, I would never want to act in such a way to think that someone else would think I'm in some way subverting their race. It's a part of them, like their history, their intellect, their other parts. It's an element of who they are as a person. Everyone out there knows I love cars. It's like a car. It's the motor, the AC, the transmission, the shifting, the steering, the power, whatever. It's a component. It's not you in your totality. And I feel that the environment we're in right now, beyond justice, beyond education, beyond religion, beyond unity, and beyond patriotism, and now even beyond faith, is race. And I can't believe we're here. I really can't. I have never felt so clearly that we are legitimately going backwards. We are regressing. Someone made a comment the other day on a channel, for those of you who follow, if you ever listen to the Daily Wire, one of the co-producers of that channel is a guy named Jeremy Boring. And he said, give it 5 years and Martin Luther King will be canceled. Martin Luther King. So then the question has to be asked. If you've gone after Ben Franklin, if you've gone after MLK, when do you come for Jesus?
They already have. I mean, they already have. That's not even a question. Like, they already have come for Jesus.
Then you have to start looking at things. So then, I mean, I'm not trying to antagonize or stoke a fire, but the question has to be asked. So then you're now willing to gamble not only civil war but holy war?
Yeah. Well, so okay, let's get. This may be a conversation for that other channel that you visited the other day.
Yes.
But
check out Jason McLean's wonderful work over at Not Another Podcast. Brought to you by Not Another Podcast. Wow, I did not see that one coming.
Yeah, none of the Bible study. Yeah,
Not another Bible study. Not another Bible study.
So again, Jason is not here. But if he were here, I would imagine he'd say this was always a supernatural and spiritual war to begin with. It always is and always has been. That this nation was born out of a desire to try to allow humanity to get to know God better. And that was always a dangerous prospect for Satan. So Satan has always sought to destroy it. I would even argue one more step that humanity, the vast majority of humanity, again, doesn't want God. They don't like God. They're God haters. They are seeking to hide from God any way that they can. And when you reject God as your Lord, as your King, what are you left with? You're left with the state. This has always been a religious war. This has always been a spiritual war. These are all tactics to destroy man's pursuit of God. That's always been, that is, in fact, I would imagine Jason would say this going one further. Again, I can't be certain, but I imagine he would say this one more step. That is the only ultimate war, is for those who have their consciences torn out by God. Is trying to hide from him. They hide from him in drugs, in carnal desires, in power. They reject the idea that they are not at the top of the ontological food chain, so they pursue power to prove that they are. They look for things to prove that they are king and not the right, and not God, who is the rightful king. That is the only war there actually ever is. Everything else spills out of that. Every evil thing that this country has done, or really, here's the big thing: every evil thing that the people of this country has ever done came out of not doing the Bible correctly. It came when they sacrificed being biblically accurate with their movements and their conversations and their beliefs, and rejecting it to go after something else. We talk about the South as being the Bible Belt. Really? You go back 160 years to when slavery was a thing, and you tell me that this was the Bible Belt. There are people who would one of the largest, best pastors of the Confederacy. He was the most famous. He flat out said that things like evolution and was the way to go. That the Bible. Sorry, I muted myself. That the he actually said that the Bible was wrong, and that the reason the founding fathers could think about undoing slavery was because they took the Bible seriously. That was an actual sermon he preached. These were people who removed sections of scripture from the Bible to make what they called the slave Bible. They actually destroyed the Word of God because they had to kind of pretend like they were at least trying to make them Christians so they would feel better. So they actually removed all the things from the Bible that had been pointed to as reasons for the American Revolution itself. You can't tell me that the South 160 years ago was the Bible Belt when they're destroying it knowingly and willfully. The fight has always been against God for human power. And that fight, the people who fight against God, the people who have pursued human power, have always used any number of tools, but they always end in the same way: evil and pain and suffering. Because there is no other way. Because if you're not on the side of God, you are on the side of Satan. And what did Satan do? Kill, steal, destroy. Look at the actions of those around you. If you want to know on whose side someone is, what is their behavior? What is their behavior? What does it lead to? Does it lead to productivity? Does it lead to creation? Does it lead to happiness? Does it lead to fulfillment? To helping others? Or does it lead to destruction? To murder, to violence, to lying? That's all you need to know. That's how you know what side you're on. This new form of racial identitarianism is just racism, and it has led to death, destruction, and pain because it can do nothing else. But that's what Jason would say, I would imagine.
But he would have said it much, much more suavely, more debonair. I mean,
right? Yeah, no, he would have said it way better than I did. Yeah,
if one knows Jason, they know it takes. Jason's like a slow sip of whiskey. He's someone that, after Jason doesn't do push-ups. He remains in place. The earth goes up and down.
This is true. This is absolutely true. And he would have said it far more sexily than I would have.
Absolutely. Certainly with more modesty. No, precisely. Look, as we're wrapping here tonight, I think that, look, we can all go back and forth. Let's prove the point with our listeners tonight. I want to take a quick circle around the horn here. I see we have some new fans, and guys, we want to let you know we talk about these things in pre and post production sometimes, and we want to share with you. The engagement that we get from you guys on this show is fantastic, and we love it. And we are not a chase the numbers kind of show. We have done no advertising at all. We haven't posted this stuff. I mean, other than, texts out to friends and family, we don't do this. We want to organically grow this. So when we see that we have 38 followers, we are very proud. And we know that over time that number is going to grow, because we'd rather have people that are down for the show. And we're still working on it. We're still a work in progress, guys. And whether it takes us 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, we're going to have fun with it. We want to thank you guys for being a part of this. I want to go around the horn real quickly, like we always do. We see our fans out there, our truest and triest friends, triedest friends that have been here from the beginning, with the greatest name of all, Cheese Freak Ginger Snap. Nothing can beat that. Of course, a salty one, and our dear friend Susan is here tonight. I want to say hi to Titan. I'm seeing some newer names, and that's always good. So welcome aboard to everyone. I know that as we scroll through here, Mr. D Knuckle is a teammate from the very beginning, and seeing how much you guys are going back and forth, guys. You're proving the point. You're defining the existence of what this show is for, and that is, at the end of the day, whether we agree or disagree, I think is irrelevant. I think it's our capacity to create an environment to share those ideas, to recognize the validity or the agreement or disagreement of those ideas, but share them with one another in such a way that we find a place to contribute to all, because we are glad that you're here. But I would say Alex and I are probably more glad that you guys are out there, because you're doing things out there with people that are going to look at you and ask you, well, what do you mean you think about this? And look, guys, I've been there. I've been in places where I don't exactly, come out with my opinion as vociferously as I may once have, but that's only forcing me to learn the material better so that I can articulate myself more fluidly, more simply, more concisely, and more accurately. So I just want to take a moment to thank all of you, because this show is a foundation. Now, on a side note, if you so want to share it with 6,000 people and we monetize this baby, get that capitalist system working for us, and then fuel the jet on the way to our racing Ferraris in Monaco, I am not going to push back. I don't believe our good friend Alex will, but that Jason guy certainly would. No, what I'm saying.
No, he would not. Yeah, Jason would not want this channel to grow.
No, but what I'm saying is that, guys, this is what counts. I felt a little gloomy coming into the show tonight. I really did. I felt a little down. Last couple of days have also been extremely busy, and I've been poked and prodded in more ways than I care to think about as I go through these roundabout checkups. But I'll tell you guys, I feel a lot better, and I feel a lot better. Not even in the ability for Alex and I to speak, but more seeing what you guys are doing. And I'll tell you why. Because sometimes you just want to feel like you're not alone. And there may be 350 million of us here, 330 million, or 7 billion on the planet. But sometimes you just want to be able to think back in your head. And even if you just say, hey, I've got a show, I've got a place where everybody knows your name, I want all of you to walk in and see Norm. That's what we want you to see for this show. And I want to take a moment, and Alex, thank you for letting me. I want to take a moment to say that. It really means a lot. It really genuinely does. That we have a place that we can go. And I'm sorry, guys, I'm gonna get squishy, but it really matters. And I want you to know that you're not alone. Even if it's just your teammates that you see here that are kind of your exclusive little buddies that you have that are special just to you. I've said it every time. The way you guys introduce to each other, the way you guys communicate with each other, it is always respectful, in my opinion. I love and you guys get into some questions. You're not afraid to share. And you're not afraid to disagree, because we all share the belief that it is having the argument that counts, not silencing it. So as proud as we are, and I know that Alex supports this as well, as proud as we are for you guys to be here and choose to take your time on your Wednesday evening when you've had a busy day or you've had things going on in your life and you choose to be here, thank you. And thank you for what I'm sure you're sharing out there. Some people aren't going to learn by the sledgehammer to the face mentality. They need a little bit of that gentility, that little bit of, oh, well, I didn't know that conservatives thought that, or Republicans thought that, or Americans thought that, or whatever, Christians thought that, whatever. So we're grateful. And I want to take a moment to say thank you, because you are not alone. You belong on this channel. You belong in your families and teams with where you are. And the beliefs, the philosophies, the ideologies that you hold to, I think are credible and valid. And whether we agree on all things or not, I agree that you have the right to your opinion. to share it freely, and as we used to say proudly, though I may disagree with your opinion, I will fight to the death for you to have it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Uh, Thank you, Nick. Thank you for what you just said. That meant a great deal, I know, to everyone listening, whether live or on record. And thank you to everyone being here. And again, if you join us, if you're unable to join us live and you join us on replay, thank you for joining us at all. Thank you for sharing us. Thank you for supporting us. Because ultimately, this is not about us. It's about making the world a better place. Right now, the forces that want to divide and destroy are active and they seem to be winning. But I assure you that there is always a fight and we can win this. We just have to win it together. On behalf of myself and Nick, we say thank you and we'll see you next time.
Take care, guys.